last summer, we also decided to get a farm in Hawaii. Well, we're converting it into a farm. It's like a very rural, rundown pasture, but now we're starting the nursery. So we're planting cacao in the fall.
Ooh, cacao. I love
Yeah.
that.
Cacao and some, tulsi, holy basil, reishi, tropical reishi grows there, and then also turmeric. So it's a dream. It's a, with my kids, like we go once a month. We're kind of back and forth. So it happens more slowly, but it's just no hurry, no rush. It's just this beautiful unfolding project.
Oh, that's amazing. There's nothing more powerful than planting powerful plants. That-
Yes.
That's for sure.
Yes.
Especially, throw a seed in the air and it drops and it grows in Hawaii for sure.
Have you
Uh,
spent a lot of time over there?
I haven't spent a ton of time in Hawaii, obviously in other locations, but yeah, I mean, Kauai a few times, that kind of thing. But um, yeah, it's just like it's a ridiculous. I looked at some cacao and some cacao farmers and saw what they were doing and some
Yeah.
moringa stuff. Moringa, you should throw some moringa in too because that's gonna ease it. Well, actually,
It
it's
grows.
it's
Yeah.
not gonna grow probably great. It actually loves stress. So
Yeah.
it's probably too easy for it. But if you grow it, cut it off early, and then it will grow into a bush, and you'll get a lot more instead of letting it grow to a tree.
Yeah. What's interesting for me is my mother's from the Philippines, and so I have
Oh, oh,
tropical blood, and I've always been drawn to tropical places. So in the Philippines, they call it morangay.
of
It has,
course, yes.
yes, and it's in the soup. So I grew up getting it at the market. It was like in all our stews. So then, of course, for me going to Hawaii, there's so many parallels. It really does feel like I'm coming home. It just, I don't know, tropical land always really feels the best for my for my
You're,
soul, for my
you're
constitution.
Yeah, well, that's Mullingar. I haven't heard the name for so long, but I was in the Philippines when one of my many places of running around with, and that was with Moringa, and that was very common
Yes.
for people to have a tree
Yes.
and just pull the leaves and as that's a part of their culinary. So I mean, I think that's the best part of the indigenous love that's passed down, right? Is that here is some what's common inclusion into the dietary, commonplace of a family, and for us or from people not in that, it's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's the greatest superfood ever, or whatever.
I know it's just like grown, it's wild, it's so inexpensive. You know what was crazy, Darin? When I was in Rwanda, I always find that you're like, oh, they're using all the plants. But then I was part of this nonprofit called Gardens of Health, and we were giving seeds to the mothers and teaching them how to cultivate and grow. And they would get their like their saplings, like their trees.
Mhm.
And there were so many avocado trees in the region, and they weren't eating them. So we were giving some avocado trees to the family. We're like, hey, you can eat this stuff. But it was one of the only places in the world that they hadn't embraced that particular plant that was growing there. So, anyways, we were integrating it as a food, and obviously a great calorie source for people, a great fat source.
Isn't that wild? Isn't that wild? Like the thing that like
Yes,
everyone wants an avocado here, and then it's like staring at in their face in other places. You're like, hey,
I
that's
know.
that's food.
The tree of life is right here.
Oh man, that's incredible. So, were you born in the States though?
So I was born in the States. My mom was born in the States. She came over with a Fulbright, like an academic scholarship in her 20s. She would get really mad if people would look at my dad, who's, this white Irish, Scottish guy, and say, oh, were you in the military? And that's how you met them.
Mm.
She's like, I came here on my own. It would annoy her. But yeah, so I have that really strong Asian perspective, though. I was raised, my mom and our auntie from the Philippines raised me until I was 14. So yeah, just like a different way, like very to this day, very soup, very stew-based eating.
Mm.
Like a lot
Mhm.
of that traditional, I'm plant-based. So I make plant-based versions. But yes, like a lot of that, it's just yeah, it's an interesting way of just it's different than how my friends would eat cereal every day for breakfast, and we always had the rice cooker on. I would eat rice, 3 times a day with vegetables and soup and things. And to this day, I'm
Right.
still a really big rice eater. My kids are rice eaters.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And the weird carb phenomenon of fear, which is so strange and misunderstood. And I love that. And that's also, it's a very strong Asian influence, is
Yeah.
that, listen, add this to the soups and the stews, and that was also, Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine. It's
Yeah.
like it's really the cornerstone of, food is truly the hundreds of thousands of years. That was our medicine. That was how we stayed strong and took care of ourselves. And now, certainly we've made some left turns in our society.
Yes. And also where my work has expanded, there in our 4 cornerstones are food, body, emotional well-being, and spiritual growth, and how it ties together the inner state.
Mm.
And the Vedic teachings, the yogis from thousands of years ago talked about this union, right, between the small self and the divine, or, universe, whatever word you want to use. But they always talked about diet. They always taught their students how to eat, because it is such a profound influence on our energy. And so, yes, like from a physical standpoint, it's, the nutrients and the minerals are creating the cellular structure, but also energy. What we eat has the ability to help us feel more calm and equanimity, access to our intuition, or it can make us feel really dense and take a lot of energy and digestion and make us feel cloudy. So that was, when I went backpacking after college, Darin, I was on the road for 3 years. I know you and I share that
Oh,
love of, it was only supposed to be a few weeks, but then I did it so inexpensively. I mean, I'm talking like, sometimes being homeless, I would strap my backpack sometimes to the bench in, the train station in China, so I didn't have to pay another night. I camped for 7 months across Africa, just living out of my car,
wow.
out of my tent. Oh yeah, I went really out there. Over
Wow.
50 countries. I was by myself, but I would meet people along the way. Um, so I don't even know why I'm telling you this. Where I started,
But
but
it's a cornerstone of you. I mean, that's for sure. Like,
that's
that's
a big
like,
part of my, where my philosophy formed. But yes, I went to India. This is where it
mm,
comes, and it had the biggest impact on me, just because I had never heard of these ideas about union and oneness. And my main teacher, Paramahansa Yogananda, who I
mhm.
read about in India, the underlying energy matrix of all things. So that really informed my perspective of nutrition. It was from this energetic standpoint. And then I came back, Darin, after 3 years, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I just started a free blog. And then I was teaching yoga asanas. And then I was going back to nutrition school. And then I was doing my meditations there, and I was doing these teachings from Yogananda. And it was like I stepped into this flow. There was a different pattern to my life. And so it was then when I started to realize, like, oh, it's energy. It's not just numbers. In the West, we tend to over quantify things, and it's all numbers and numbers, but it really is how we eat, how we live, our relationships, our interactions. It's all just streams of energy. So when we pick these nutrient dense plants that are full of aliveness, like sprouts, which I eat every day, or we're meditating, it's all just different ways we're tuning in with our energy. So that's how my philosophy started. It wasn't, book learning, a lot of book learning, but it really was being on the road and being in these cultures for so long that permanently did shift my mindset.
Well, we definitely share that. And if you want to learn, I think the book knowledge is great because it definitely satisfies a mental curiosity, right? But
Yes.
but then the immersions and the sitting and, like, let me just hang out for the afternoon with this family and ask questions, and what is that, and why are you doing it? Like, and that's like 2,700 ideas of,
Yeah.
like, whoa, this is crazy. And I love what you said, because it is a reductionism. We want to, we started off right with the fear phobia of carbohydrates, like, oh my god, carbs, proteins, fats, all of that stuff, and we so miss
Yeah.
the qualities of the I mean, freaking, for God's sakes, the photons of the sun right, are hitting the plants, and the plants are converting sun energy. Obviously, the interaction of the mineral kingdom and the incredible soil matrix, this coming together in materializing out of out of light, right? And then we're converting it ultimately into the freeing of that light photon again. And so, and it's so important. I love what you said. So how do you then take that when people, I mean, I don't even want to reduce it down to this question, because it's like, we're missing the true information of food.
Yes, exactly. So there's been this like disconnect, right? That happened around, I don't know, the 40s, 50s. We started canning food. We started losing that direct relationship with food. At the time, it was like industrial revolution. And now everybody's coming to the cities, and we're going to make it more efficient. And at a certain point, there was just like, a few minerals in the soil. We started to have this disconnection. And then it continued through the decades, and dieting, fat-free craze and all of this. But down to the very base level, which I was able to touch, Darin, being out of the Western world for 3 years. So I think what was really significant was that I wasn't in Europe. I wasn't in Canada or Australia. I was literally, in mostly small villages and out of cities, but definitely out of the Western world. So like the wonder, you regain this, when we step back, it's like, look in nature. If you look in the garden, what's the most amazing thing in the garden that's going to grab your eye? It's the flowers and it's the fruit. It's like the pinnacle of nature. The plants are growing and they're gathering all the nutrients. And then here's like the real jewel, the flowers and the fruit. So the yogis have always taught, for instance, that fruit is the highest vibration. A fruit has the ability to completely change and reconstruct your energy and allow you to meditate and to feel and to be in tune with, your third eye downloads and the crown chakra. And now we live in the Western world where people are like, oh, fruit has sugar too. So it somehow gets lumped in with like the soda and, the crap candy. And I don't know about you, but I have this juice shop that, it's gone a little off the rails with the pandemic, but it will reopen. It's at the Four Seasons. And I can't tell you how many people come in and they're like, no fruit, no banana, my protein smoothie, but I'll have 3 times the protein powder. Right. So like you're saying, it's like, we're focusing on like, it's distorted. It's noisy. It's confusing. People have all the different studies to back up what they're saying. But like you said, you go back to the land. You go back to like the fundamentals. You look in the garden, you look in the nature, and we can discern. Our own intuition is like, we reach for that beautiful fig or that beautiful banana, and that's giving us the life force. It doesn't have to be so complicated.
I mean, that's you nailed it. It's almost on the one hand, the common instinctual self, the what we know. And I had an amazing conversation with Dr. David Edwards, who's aerosol physicist from Harvard. And he was like, let me just tell you about the olfactory system.
Yeah.
Is it your sense of smell? Of course. And I was like, oh yeah, food selection. And he goes, even better. There's 1 trillion sense receptors in the nose, 1 trillion. Right. So I think of that stuff as I talk to you and going, our senses, our eyes, our nose, our other senses beyond our 5, right? Yeah. That are perceiving and receiving the colors, the timing, the soil, the time of day, the sense of smell for our food selection. Where in there, if you're seeing the seduction of flowers and fruits, would you turn and start carving your teeth on a dead animal, right? So it's like this weird, and then yes, of course, through survival, the human is unbelievable. It can adapt to anything, which is why we're freaking here and doing a lot of crazy shit, but we adapt.
Yes.
And so like that I think of integration, as you're saying, like a higher level of common sense and instinct and integration of everything, right?
Yes. So remember, Darin, the 4 cornerstones I said are food, body, emotional well-being, and spiritual growth. And so it really does tied together. When I see people that are hyper fixated with like their body or food, for instance, and they ask all the minutia questions, and maybe I'm not getting enough riboflavin, and maybe there's a hidden thing here, maybe enough, it's just so detailed. And it's like, no, we need to go wider with our self-care. You know a lot about food, but where's your self-connection, your stress management, your mental health, right? The mind is just churning and churning. And that, of course, is inflammatory. It imbalances our hormones. And so it's very important that we look wider. Like I said, the yogis talked about meditation, but they also talked about diet. And what you were saying before, Darin, about all the perception of the colors and everything out here. So my new book is called You Are More Than You Think You Are. And it's really about connecting to the true self, which is beneath the mind chatter and the fear. And what that does is it strengthens your intuition. So in a greater sense, what the yogi said is most of our attention is out here, right? Peripheral nervous system sensing all the time. And that's great and that's important. But what happens is that we tend to over-identify with the shell of who we are. So we get confused if we're always just looking out here. Suddenly there's the confusing information. Suddenly there's a lot of noise. Suddenly we compare ourselves, we contrast, we don't feel good enough. It's always because we're out here. And of course, the world is more noisy, and there's TikTok and there's YouTube and there's all this stuff. So what the yogis have always taught from the start is just this balance of attention out here and then turning the searchlight of the senses inside, right? So that's what meditation, introspection, stillness, being in nature do. It allows us to harmonize our inner energy and just be able to feel the true self, which is our connection to the divine, to universe, to spirit. So now we settle down, and now we can enjoy things which are simple but profound, like simple food, like conversation, instead of, oh my gosh, I have to be on a new TikTok video every 5 seconds, right? The attention span, it's just to get very frenetic, which leads to stress and anxiety and all this. So the natural state is to be more grounded and to be calm. So we can take information, we can discern it, but we have to balance that with the inner attention. And then we start to feel strong and resilient and intuitive and loving. And all the things we're looking for is this balance between outer peripheral nervous system and central nervous system, right? And pulling the power in.
What's some of the I mean, I resonate 1,000,000% with that. And what is your like, if people are listening right now,
Yeah.
not to mention they're going to check out your book, they're for sure going to do that. And what are some steps that people can, because we all know it's overwhelming with the chatter, and every day it blinks by, and I didn't do enough, and I didn't get enough money, and I didn't get enough followers, and I don't know what I'm going to do, and what do I want to create in my life? I don't know. Like, it's all of that stuff. I'm a mom, I'm giving everything to everyone else, and I don't know who the hell I am, what I want to do. What are some things that people can do from your perspective to start that integration process?
Yes. So there's a few practical practices that I want to share, Darin. But first of all, I'll share that in a larger sense, what has really helped me with the stress and, like you said, all the noise. Am I doing enough? Like all the bullshit. Like, am I balanced enough? Which makes me feel like I'm on a tightrope.
Totally.
It's, first of all, clarifying your purpose. So chapter 3 of the book is called You Are a Warrior. And it basically summarizes the Bhagavad Gita, which is, I don't know if you've read it, it's this incredible ancient text. And it's about this big battle, right? So it's like charioteers and battle formations and horses and all this stuff. But the subtext, it's an allegory for the battle we're waging every day, the battle of the mind. So in that text, Arjuna has the option of the biggest army in the world, or the Council of Krishna. And the Council of Krishna is the voice of the true self. So anyways, in that chapter, I summarize how the scriptures talk about dharma, about your purpose. And so for me, what I talk about in that chapter, purpose from the Vedic perspective, is your unique gifts and what you can bring to the world, paired with how do you serve? How can you help the collective? So it gets really simple when you look at it that way. For me, I would say my purpose is connecting more deeply to the true self inside of me and teaching others to do the same. And the true self is authentic, it's loving, it's kind. So when I get up in the morning, and every morning, Darin, I said to myself, okay, this is my purpose. It takes the stress off of like, did I do enough on my to-do list? I'm showing up, I'm playing with my kids, I'm talking to Darin, I'm going to have a Zoom after with my team, whatever I'm doing. If the central purpose is clear, it's non-specific. So it really is just like the energy I'm bringing into everything. When I switch that mindset of like, it has to be this one thing, this one achievement, the list, which is very linear, very masculine, it just opened up everything for me. So that's the one thing I'll say is once you start to clarify your purpose, non-specific to one project or one thing, it really makes a difference in your life perspective. The other thing besides meditation, which I talked about a few times, I'm a big believer in morning meditation. It sets the flow. But every
Sure.
10 seconds, Darin, our biochemistry is shifting, right? And neuroscience has really shown this now. It's moment to moment. So, what I do throughout the day, like you said, to get out of the chatter, where's the chatter? It's up here in the head, right? It's like the constant distraction, seeing what's going on, moving around. So, the place where we can go for stability and groundedness is the body, because the body doesn't have the same chatter. So, moment to moment, if I start to feel myself getting chattery, the first thing I focus on is the bottoms of my feet. I
Mhm.
literally feel, where is Kimberly in this crazy moving world? Oh, I'm here, right? Because so much of this anxiety is projection of the future based on trauma of the past. But when we just feel our feet, which sounds really basic, and then I put my hand on my belly, my hand on my heart, and I just by tuning in, it starts to regulate the internal processes, the heart rate, the breath, the sense of presence. And then you can really feel, oh, the calming down, the turning on of the prefrontal cortex, getting out of the over emotional amygdala and all these different parts of your brain. So just remember, you're constantly rewiring. And then remember that every 90 seconds is what it takes to move through a really turbulent emotional feeling. So if you're feeling really agitated or angry, just remember, take some deep breaths, go to the bathroom, go outside, just take a sip of water. 90 seconds, you can create that pause in 90 seconds, things will feel more clear. It's not going to mean everything's better, but I try to always take those pauses. And then the third practical practice, Darin, is you tune into your heart or your upper abdomen at any time during the day. And if you're feeling a sense of tightness or constriction in your body, it's usually emulating the ego, which is small, limited. It's based on fear. So even if you're saying the right things, the energy building up in your body doesn't align. So it's, we introspect, we say, oh, something made me react. So what I do when I feel that tightness and I'm not in this expanded, receptive, looser quality of the true self, I want to shift my energy before I send that email, before I go on the podcast, before I have that meeting, because I'm not in my full power. Right. So it's just that constant checking in, making little tweaks. And then we just feel more flow in our day. And the subtitle of the book, Darin, is Practical Enlightenment for Everyday Life. Enlightenment just means more freedom. It means more awareness. So we can be in more unconditional love. We can be in more gratitude and connection without the bullshit that keeps us small, the old thoughts and the wounds. We just start to, the Gita uses the word absorb. We start to process, release, absorb more inside of us and feel more free. Our lives become a mirror for being more open and more in that bliss.
I love that. You summarize it so well, and a few things pop up that because it's like where our head goes, we go, right? So
Yes.
our biology, our chemistry, our quantum field, you name it, is going where our mind is going. So, this is a practice, right?
Yeah.
The mind is addicted to everything that we are continuously feeding it, from the TikToks, the Instagrams, the quick things, the read this, read that, compare to this, compare to that, I'm
Yeah.
not enough, all of that stuff. But it's so important because I think what you're saying is this isn't that you have to start. You're gonna fall, you're gonna learn and get back up and do all these things. And it's also another thought popped in as you were saying that is, it's like we have to go in order to go out, meaning that we have to go in order to then serve our purpose, or else we're just getting yanked around. It's just a pinball game. We don't know what the hell. And that's stressful. Just think of that, right? Everyone can relate going, I think it's this because this person's doing it and they made a bunch of money. I think it's that because they look great in their clothes and I'm just going to do that. It's like, or we compare ourselves to a celebrity and then we do, like, it's all of this stuff. And it's literally, I think what you're describing of that, it literally is, we need to enlighten to ourselves, to that a great practitioner years ago when I went to India, I have another funny story that relates to our joined India stories, and that is that India is such a rotor rooter, isn't it?
I love it. You either love it or you hate it.
Oh man.
Second I landed there, I was like, give it to me. I love this.
Oh man. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, so I kind of forgot my point, but
What?
the most important thing is just that practice. This was it. There's no person closer to you. There's no thing that's going to give you the insight that you can gain and garner from the practice of learning to listen and shutting that down. And there, I always think of like, we have the greatest thing ever, and that is the entire universe is coming into us, and everyone into our soul, into our spirit. And when we stop the brain and turn in, we get to listen to that and be instructed and be guided. And like you said, to be open, because what are we magnetizing if we're letting our brains yank us around? And what are we magnetizing if we're opening up our hearts again? Right?
Yeah. You know, what's so important, Darin, is understanding the difference between thoughts and feelings and emotions, and also your intuition. And in the beginning, I think it can get really confusing because the head is so noisy. But through the practices, like you said, we learn. It's like the surface of the ocean is really choppy, but when you go scuba diving, you deflate your vest. Those of us that have been lucky enough to go, you go down into this really still place. And that's what the Vedic teachings teach us, that underneath all the turbulence of the mind, there is this mattress of peace. There is this inner resource, which we can start to tap into, called the true self. But we need to learn to discern. When Yogananda talks about the lake being really calm and then it reflects, right? It reflects the divine inspiration. It reflects like the truth. And so we have to get to that place. And so it is this training. Like you said, the world is really noisy. The world isn't gonna give it to you unless you really carve it out for yourself. And here's what sounds like, sometimes it can sound like a hard message. I know it did for me when I first heard this, that, first of all, transformation happens from the inside out. But in the middle of being broke, in the middle of like being in a really difficult life situation, it's hard to trust, as I had to, that inner state. So I remember coming back from that backpacking trip and being so broke, Darin. I would get 3 oranges for $1 for lunch, because I read a study that oranges keep you fullest the longest, right? I was like strapped. And so I came back and I would sit though on the edge of my Murphy bed. I was subletting this place and I was doing my meditations. I was doing the practices, and then it was pretty wild. It was like these patterns started to emerge, and there was just this flow that came into my life. I was going back, I was teaching yoga, I was going back to nutrition school. I just started this free blog, but I really just got in, and it just, I know it's hard to describe. But I will say the truth is for every human. A truth means it's not just for some of us, it's for everyone. It means we can change our lives. We can change the outer circumstances, but it comes from the inside. Like you said, if we're looking around and we're feeling bad and then we're just trying to change our bodies or out here, that's a part of it too, but it really is inner state. It really is our energy. We're co-creating in every moment, whether we realize it or not. So abundance, there's a chapter in the book. Oh, first of all, Darin, the book is in 3 sections. Number 1 is removing the biggest blocks, like fear, right? Yogananda said there's 26 soul qualities to develop. Number 1 is fearlessness. So we need to get the blocks out of the way. Number 2 is embodying, really getting to know who you are. So intuition is part 2, peace. And then part 3 is where we create, right? So there's abundance, magnetism. The longest chapter in the book is you are creator. The problem, Darin, is we go right to creating, but we don't do this inner assessment and change the energy. We can say the right things, but underneath the fear might be driving a lot of our decisions or energy. And it's not really going to create what we want. But abundance, I want to say, is Yogananda was teaching. I was reading this while I was so broke. It wasn't just about money. It's about the fullness of each moment. So moment to moment, another practice is checking in. Where am I in the scale of abundance? Am I coming to this moment with just fullness of life? Or as my thinking of lack and I'm always missing something or something's wrong. That's an energy that really does change our gravitational field. People feel it, opportunities and people will, come in more or less based on our energy. And that's a truth. That's a quantum physics truth. So it's moment to moment. Where am I on the scale of abundance? And even if we don't have the life circumstances we want, we can self-generate that energy. So there's a practice in that chapter, Darin, from the Vedas about bringing that into your heart and still bringing fullness. And eventually that repeated vibration means your outer world has to match up. It will change.
Absolutely. Bam, bam. I love that. I want to step back or step forward to address the thing that may be hard for people.
Yes, please.
And that is, I think there's a reason we see, and myself included, and like just being human, it's easy to jump steps and just go, I just want to create, I want to be abundant, I want to get everything I ever wanted, and then not kind of, just to use this as an example, turn and look. It's like, I have pain, I have shame, I have sadness, I have fear.
Yeah.
I haven't really looked at it. I actually am afraid to turn and look at it. And so my shadow, my whatever that is I don't want to recreate the pain, right? So people come up with so many excuses not to look at that. So what would you say to that? Because I think, from my perspective, just this tiny little aspect is like, it's an incredibly powerful ally, right?
Yeah.
It's just an unexpressed understanding. So what would you say to people like, oh shit? Because we know the fear, we know the anger, we know the resentment. So what can we do to kind of get over that, express that, understand it, acknowledge it, and then move and be free?
Yes, thank you. Big one. So number one, I will say that, first of all, the perspective of we're not necessarily recreating the pain, but we're actually processing it and digesting it for the first time. So energy or emotions are meant to be energy in motion. So what happens is we feel things in a really healthy context. You widen the container so you actually feel it like digesting food, and then it processes and it leaves. The problem is the way we're wired and the way that most of us are taught is like you know, something pricks you and then you kind of move away or you distract or you push it down or whatever it is. You don't actually like go into it. Right. So I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Dr. David Hawkins. He's an amazing psychologist, and I reference some of his work in the new book. But what he says is we literally have to metabolize that energy to the end, and then we can be free. And eventually we get to the bottom of the well. So I'll give you an example, Darin, is, almost exactly within 2 weeks, 5 years ago, I lost my mom really suddenly. And so it was, the first time I had lost someone close to me. And so it was like big grief, big feelings, right? But I was practicing. I'd read Dr. David Hawkins a lot during this process. So I would feel the grief. And what he says is intense feelings last usually only 10 minutes or less, as long as we're feeling and not thinking like, oh, this sucks, this shouldn't happen to me, blah, 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 blah. No, you feel and then you release. And then when it comes up, you release. And eventually you get to the bottom. So that's the first thing, is realizing that, oh, if you have wounds and things that bother you, like all this stuff, it's that you never really metabolized it. So for me, learning that for the first time as an adult and getting down means I'm free of those reactions and the triggers more and more, like 90%. So number one, realizing like, oh, there's work here to do. And number two, realizing that the reason we do the work is on the other side is the bliss. And it is that freedom that we want. So if your life isn't going the way you want it to go, on one hand, you could say it sucks, I don't want to feel this stuff. But the other hand is, do you want a shitty life, or do you want to step into your power and your fullest potential? And this is what it takes. This is the energy. No spiritual bypassing. There's no pretending it's not there. We go through it. And then what happens is the fullness of feeling emotions, Darin, this is the other side of it. If you're suppressing the pain, guess what else you're suppressing? The Kundalini energy, the fullness of the energy rising up your spine, the vitality, the aliveness, the passion. You start to deaden yourself. You start to become more numb, and then your life starts to feel smaller and smaller. So yes, there's a period of feeling, but through the practices, you realize the true resilience we have. We're not our feelings and emotions. We feel them. They prick, they hurt, and then they move away, right? So it's just how we metabolize food. We need to do that step in the process. So part one of the book, Darin, there's a chapter on wholeness, which is about identifying your not so great qualities and the ones you're proud of, and going underneath the behaviors. The wholeness is still us underneath the changingness on the surface. So you can release a lot of the shame that so many of us hold and weigh us down, and all of that that's so tied to behavior. It's a whole other topic.
Yeah, you describe things so well in that, and the thing that stuck out to me was, and maybe other people, in that you had things happen to you, right?
Yes.
They occurred, but you haven't. What the biggest takeaway that I just heard was, we haven't metabolized them. We haven't allowed that energy to move. It's been stuck,
Yes.
and out of time and space, it's still stuck, right? So it hasn't been acknowledged. It isn't us. It's just a thing. It's an event. It's a,
Yes.
and so if we stop identifying to that, because then we identify all of the reasons that it keeps it in place, the shame, the fear, the anger of whatever, and the anger you have towards a person, a thing, an event, that whatever it is, it's like an unmetabolized, amazing peach that you haven't allowed yourself to fully get through and get the benefits of. And then on the other side of it, I love that you've made this connection. And that is, if you're unwilling to feel that, you're unwilling to feel, and therefore you can't receive everything that you truly want. You can't really feel the passion. You can't really feel the connection. You can't really feel the abundance of the entire universe coming to you as you. And that's what it's all about anyway. Because it's not about the money. It's not about the...
Exactly. It's about allness, right? It's about like the fullness of energy. So you don't tap into that unless you allow the fullness of feelings and emotions to come through you. That's like, when there's like, the Shakti, this Sanskrit word where it's just pulsing with life force. If you try to tamper with that, if you dampen it, the life force just starts to get smaller and smaller. Another big thing connected to this, Darin, is moving beyond labels. Think about our whole society. It's like the way we describe the way we put ourselves in boxes, right? I'm this and that. And I'll tell you something else. When my mom passed away suddenly, it sort of opened this Pandora's box where I started looking at my life and I was like, well, this isn't exactly what I want. And so, long story short, I moved out. I became a single mom. And there was this label I put on myself like, oh shit, I don't want to be a single mom. I don't like that label. Right. But it was like, it was a really strong feeling. And then it led to the greatest strength of all, because then I kind of sank down into myself for 5 months. I've met with a monk from the Self-Realization Fellowship, and he said, treat your home like an ashram. So I just went in, all the pain, I cry in my closet every night. And when I came out, Darin, after 5 months with a lot of meditation, a lot of many hours reading scripture, which is very comforting to me, I came with a new sense of wholeness. And so it was like beyond the labels. I think that's where like our real power is, where we don't give an F. Because it's like, here I am. I'm not trying to fit into this identity or this box. I'm not trying to have you see me in a certain way. I'm just me. And so the freedom and the unleashing of energy that comes from that opens up incredible abundance in your life. Because again, you're not just like, let me pigeonhole myself and keep myself small.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what you described is, number one, I know that no energy's destroyed, and your mother is around, and she left her physical form, and I'm sorry that happened to you. I can relate in my own way. So number one on that, and that is, I don't have a child, but aside from the parents and that, so some of the most intense energy, grief, sadness, and in your case, if it happens suddenly, there's a level of shock, obviously, that I can't imagine. But I think it's so important I think in this society, the one we're currently inhabiting, we give virtually nothing to that kind of grief.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, I think every aspect of moving through life, from a relationship of a day, a week, a month, a lifetime, is the level of grief. there's any time
Yes.
so we don't allow ourselves. And I think that's why I kind of go back to this part, in that I know for me, it's unbelievably powerful when you allow all of that energy to
Yeah.
come and to say it's okay, and to allow it to pull you and take you and pull, uncover things. And so I think that's why it's so important for what you said, is like the relearning of us here in the society of how to grieve and how to allow those energies so that they transform and create, the truth, closer truth of who we actually are.
Yes, and these emotions, Darren, they're wild, right? So it feels a bit scary.
Yeah.
But I think the key for me and doing this work has been to contact that real stable place inside of you, the true self. So if you have that inside the foundation, it's okay for things to get crazy because you always have that. When you don't have that, what the ego tries to do is control. It tries to control other people. It tries to control circumstances, or it keeps you wanting to be safe. It keeps you in your comfort zone, right? Because it means you're trying to control the outside. But we realize how futile that is, and that we don't have to waste all this energy doing this and manipulating and playing small when we have the safety and security inside of us. So
Yeah.
that comes from meditation. That comes just from introspection and all the practices that I love to share about, that have helped me a lot, of going into the spine and brain, like inside the eternal part of us. It really changes our relationship with everybody else. And it
Yeah.
also changes our relationship, Darin, I'll say, with food, because all your relationships get healthy. So now you're not projecting onto food your unmet emotional needs and the wanting it to make you feel better and shift energy. We want food to taste good. We want to enjoy it, but it is just food. So now when you bring in all this energy, back to the four cornerstones: food, body, emotional well-being, spiritual growth. Now, when you're working with energy in your life in this more totalistic way, all your relationships heal because you're taking back your power. You're able to validate, soothe, nurture yourself, and you don't need all this stuff.
Yeah. And
Ultimate freedom.
it's ultimate free. Absolutely. And then it's a different magnetism, because like, think about it. If you don't take care of that and you have all these unmet needs that you're unwilling to look at or exercise, then you'll attract those kind of things into your life, and then they never will fill that which you're trying to fill. Now, the difference of that, or the reverse of that, what you were saying, is that if you come and clear your space and align yourself, now imagine what that life is bringing in. It's like
Yeah.
it's an addition to, not trying to fill up, right?
Exactly. It's all frequency, and when that book came out, my dad made so much fun of it, like 30 years ago, The Secret, and it seemed really woo-woo, right? My mom would loved it. My dad was like, this is ridiculous. But now what they're finding is, back to energy and frequency. It's not woo-woo. There's actually science backed. There's this amazing author, Dr. Stephen Skograntz, I believe is how you say it. And in the book, he talks about synchronicity rising out of chaos in nature. So you start to see where fireflies fire off at the same time, and you see matching frequencies. So back to what we're saying, there is the inner state, right? That you can't cheat. There is the inner energy. Is it harmonious? Is it calm? Is it grounded? Is it resilient and strong? Or is it chaotic and scattered? And based on your inner energy, that is reflected in your outer world. So when we're coming from, and you can tell that in your own intuition, you're drawn to people that have that certain magnetism and, more freedom, and aren't so sensitive and aren't so drawn into certain labels. There's just more expansion. And so it does match up. And so I describe in the book to Ethan, there's a chapter called You Are Magnetic. And I tell the story about how I came to write a book with Deepak Chopra, who was one of my author heroes growing up. And I read many of his books, and it was really interesting. I mean, I really did these practices, and I sent him my book, and he's like, great. And then he loved it. And then he gave a quote, but I was like, I feel like there's more to do with him. And I focused on it, and I was generating, and guess what? Boom. One day, Ethan, I ran into him on the sidewalk, literally. I
Really?
said, I said, Deepak, it's me, Kimberly. I just said, you know, my book. I was so excited. I was like, you just reviewed it. And he was like, oh, yeah. But we had that face to face. And then he gave me his number. And then I texted him. And we met at a coffee shop. And in 2 hours, we decided to write a book together and had the whole title and everything. So your
Wow.
life can change in a minute when you're the shepherd of your inner energy. It doesn't mean everything's going to work out perfectly, but it does mean there's more flow. It does mean there's more easefulness. It does mean that there's more expansion. We are the ones that are co-creating. So we can just sink down and be the victim, or we can say, hey, I need to fine tune some things here because I can see what's reflected out is not exactly what I want, which is, you know, me. Again, I was broke. And then my relationships, Ethan, I had a lot of issues for a while. You know, the whole single mom story and all that. But, you know, where I sit today, it's like this pulling in, it just keeps feeling more free. It also feels like it's getting more and more simple. You know, it's just like the complicatedness of the mind. It just starts to quiet down and it's like, oh, love, connection, you know, nature. What else are we here for?
Yeah. Well,
Serving each other.
yeah, and getting, you know, like you said, you started off with understanding, well, getting through the emotional side of it and understanding your passions and your whys and all of those things. There's things that are bigger than just the car payments. They're bigger than just the dress sizes. They're the through line, which is deeper connected to, and sometimes it is between you and you, the spirit, the soul, God, that light. It's like, hey, I'm clear, and I'm talking.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking every day. I'm clear. I'm going in.
That's the main line, right? It's
Right.
like us and God. Or universe, whatever word you want to use. I always say that, but I say God. Okay. It's like
I say all of that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Just it's between us.
Yeah.
And so like these labels and what everybody thinks and trying to get validation with like social media, all this stuff. It's like, no, us and God. And then we see that the light, the God spirit is inside of us. And guess what? Spirit's inside of Darin, is inside of everyone else. So this is where the service part of purpose, it's like we have unique gifts, but when we serve, it takes the focus off me, and the ego, which, you know, it's not healthy and it breeds that more of that suffering. So when we expand out, we automatically feel more joy when our intention is to serve. We really get the benefits as well. And so it opens up all our energy in our lives.
So much more fulfilling, right? And it's not, and then this is where, if it gets woo-woo for certain people listening to this, it's not divorcing paying the bills. Being abundant includes everything.
Yeah.
It includes having enough money and being able to do what you want and create and all of that stuff. It's not the exclusion of anything. So it's important when you start to understand these frequencies, and I believe this to my core, whether people want to consciously acknowledge it or not, what you're saying is true. The quantum world, we know more than we acknowledge. We're learning along the way, but we perceive and receive and are absolutely this incredible infinite being happening to have an experience of in the body.
Yes.
And we're creating this, I feel I'm creating this bridge between this soul that I feel in ways that I can't even put into words, and this body. And like, how do we now line up all this stuff? And for me, of course, plants and eating high level foods and superfoods and all that stuff, it feels great to me.
Yeah.
And water and high vibe water and meditate every day and journal and everything else. And then what the hell do we want to do and contribute to the world? And that is in conclusion with everything. And so I just want to make that distinction, because it's so easy. People can flippantly, okay, she just brought up the secret. Okay, you know, it's like,
oh yeah, no, I'm saying we're not the secret, because that had,
yeah,
as far as I understand, it didn't have any sort of scientific
Right.
backing, which the discerning mind needs. So,
Yeah.
what
Right.
the Vedas have talked about for thousands of years is the householder path, which is what we're saying, the practicality of living life. How do you live your best life? And not being a
Yes.
Brahmin, not being a priest or a monk, but actually being in the world. And
Yeah.
so what it's practical. It's not woo-woo at all. And the more we go along, we realize, just like our Ayurvedic medicine, which comes from the Atharva Veda, which is the fourth and newest of the ancient texts, but it's all starting to be more backed up by science. And I know that, Deepak did his big study with Scripps and Duke, and I think 6 institutions, and they found a blood marker for meditators. They can actually tell from your blood if you meditate or not, right? So, anyways, it's
Wow.
it's it's not woo woo. And I would say this too, Darin, the way to really, you know, create the life that you want. Like we said, it comes from interstate, it comes from dinacharya, which is the Sanskrit word for your daily rhythms and routines.
Mm.
It's not being perfect. I say, my goal is 80%. But it's like like, again, back to the cornerstones. So my morning practice, for instance, I drink hot water with lemon. I have a glowing green smoothie with all the fiber and all the fruits and vegetables. I meditate. I journal. I take SBO probiotics. So in my morning practice, I'm touching all of the cornerstones, and that holistic approach is, what I do through the day. So I'm checking my stress. I'm checking my mind. I'm not going into some like crazy, inflammatory story in my head. It's all checking. The food is supportive of the energy, digestion, everything works together. And so it's
Yeah.
built into the daily rhythms and routines. There's a practical nature to it.
Yeah. Home life, relationships, like it's a constant kind of
Yeah.
amazing flow. If, if you if you could be the Surgeon General outside of politics, outside of anything that, and you could make swooping changes, let's just say America right now, what are some of the things that you would change, maybe in the healthcare, maybe in the food, whatever it is? What are some of the things that you would help change from a health perspective?
Oh my gosh. I mean, so much, right? I mean, um, I feel like there's so much confusion, Darin, and it's like they did the pyramid, and then they went to the circle, and all this stuff. I, I mean, you go to a food policy, right? You go to like who's being subsidized and who's not, who has access to organic and who doesn't. But I think first of all, information is so important. And I liked how, I believe with the circle, or was it Harvard did the renovation where they put a glass of water instead of glass of milk, which is like, hey guys, let's talk about dairy for a minute, right?
Oh my God.
I would, and also being a mom and sort of seeing what's going on with like kids' food and kids' lunches. Like number one, oh my God, it's a whole thing, Jared. I want to like change
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
I think that, making vegetables a much bigger emphasis in the diet. I think one of the things from the start is people just overemphasizing these enormous portion sizes of protein. And then the more information comes out, it's like we recycle proteins. We don't need as much. So it's like
100%.
really just bringing more, in the policies and the information and the education, like really having people understand that it should be mostly plants, your diet, whether you choose to be plant-based or not. Like that is the bulk. It's not the bulk should be protein. It's the bulk shouldn't be processed bread or anything, but literally plant foods, because that is obvious in the blue zones. Dan Buettner is a good friend of mine, but it's not here. And it's so fundamental and it's so basic. But it's a long-term shift that I think needs to happen, but it's the most important one. Like the whole way that we eat is turned upside down.
Well, that's it, right? It's literally like if we could create disease and disharmony, continue to do what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
Make horrible food available and beautiful food not available, subsidize food that's full of chemicals and carcinogens, and then not make available where people need it the most, food deserts and cities around the country. So it's like, it's when you look at this stuff straight on and data, and you're going, oh my God, it's utterly insane.
Yeah.
To see that. So fresh food availability, let's just start there.
Exactly. And so, it's like, I get really passionate. Love that we were talking about reishi mushrooms and some of these like
Yeah.
amazing superfoods, but then it's like lemon water, drink that before you guzzle down all your soda, and just like really basic ways to bring in fruits and vegetables into people's daily practices,
Yeah.
I think is important. But yeah, it's a big question, Darin. And I think we're making progress, but then I hear some stats and it's like people are eating 10% plants. Someone just told me, and like it's
What?
60% protein and then 30% like processed crap.
Oh,
Dr. Will Bolsowitz said this on the podcast. He was a gut health doctor. But yeah,
oh,
on my
Will,
podcast.
love Will.
Wait, sometimes I forget if I'm not interviewing you. You're interviewing me.
No, that's Will. Will's awesome. I remember I was talking to Joel Furman, and he
Oh
was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and Joel came up, and it's just sat in my brain, and he goes, from true health, not looking at BMI, because BMI doesn't give you true
Yeah,
data.
yeah.
Looking at actually people that don't have core morbidities, right? True health.
Yeah.
Of the 300 and close to 350 million people in the United States, guess what the percentage he said of people that were actually healthy? 2.5%.
Wow.
So then you look at going, again, this is just straight up just looking at face value of everything, going, is this the path that we're all agreeing here that is the one that we want to continue to go down? Because we're harming ourselves, our children, and our families and our friends and our communities by the way in which we're conducting ourselves in this space. So it's crazy. But 10% plants, that's unbelievable.
Well, the saying in Ayurveda, as is the micro, as is the macro, right?
Yes.
So it's like we get into all these like, I'm sure you have too, Darin, but on these panels with like paleo people, keto people, everybody, just the diets and the studies and stuff. But when you step back and you look at it from a macro perspective, we see the thousands of studies, and we see the long-term longitudinal studies from blue zones and actual human communities. And we see when we're eating a lot of plants, we're getting the micronutrients and the macronutrients and all these, the benefits keep going and going, right? The fiber we thought gave us sustained energy. Now we're seeing it's feeding the short chain fatty acids in the gut. So it's creating systemic de-inflammation, all this stuff, right? And then we see, wait a minute, eating more plants is better for the environment. It's less of a carbon load. It's just much, much lighter. And then it's the best thing for these animals. We don't have to breed all these factory farmed animals, and it just goes on. So yes, if we want to see what's the best, diet for the planet, it would be the best for us and the best for society and all the concentric circles as you go wider and wider. There wouldn't be a disconnect. So that simplifies it, right?
Yeah.
Like peace, live and let live.
Totally. Absolutely. I would love to see, like, what if we could have every child drink a fresh glass of water and a bowl of fruit for breakfast every day?
Oh my God.
What would that take?
No, my kids glug green smoothie, Darin, because that is so natural. If you give kids natural foods, they will choose it. Like they love it. That's what they know. They love the taste. I would love to have every child to have green smoothies every morning. What a difference.
Let's do it. Revolution. Well, hey, what a pleasure. I think this is one of many conversations.
Yes.
I love what you're doing. Love the books. And I'm sure people will put all that in the show notes, but it's such a pleasure. But we're so close. We definitely have to get together. We'll definitely have to make some revolutionary shifts together and do some stuff to knock down some barriers. So anyway, thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Oh, thank you so much, Darin. Instant connection. I love your vibe. Thank you so much for having me on. So much love.